Imagine a lone cowboy riding along the Colorado River. Suddenly, he spots a woman struggling in the rushing rapids, fighting for her life. Every second counts, and one wrong move could put them both in danger. Without hesitation, he dives in, risking everything to save her. But he has no idea that this single act of courage will change his life forever and lead to consequences he could never have imagined. If you love thrilling, real-life inspired stories of courage, mystery and unexpected twists, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Don't forget to like, share, and comment. Tell us what you would do if you were in his place. All right, let's dive in and begin this incredible story. Jack rode alone along the banks of the Colorado River, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the red cliffs of Arizona. The air smelled of dust, sagebrush, and the faint tang of river water. He was used to solitude, the endless horizon his only companion. Suddenly, movement in the water caught his eye. A figure flailing in the rapids, struggling against the current. Without hesitation, Jack spurred his horse into a gallop. Dismounting near the riverbank, he could hear her cries over the roar of the river. Adrenaline surged as he plunged into the icy water, fighting against the pull of the current. Every stroke felt like a battle, but he reached her just in time, wrapping an arm around her and dragging her toward the shore. His hands were numb, but he refused to let go. She was unconscious, coughing, shivering violently, her dark hair plastered to her face. Jack rolled her gently onto the sandy riverbank, quickly assessing her condition. Her chest barely moved. He positioned his hands on her chest and began CPR, counting silently, focusing entirely on the rhythm. The compression, the desperate hope that she would survive. Minutes felt like hours. Every fiber of his being was dedicated to keeping her alive. Finally, her eyes fluttered open, confusion giving way to awareness. She gasped for air, coughing but alive. Relief hit Jack in waves. He pulled a worn blanket from his saddlebag and wrapped her, speaking softly, trying to calm both herself and himself. She looked at him with wide, wary eyes, and for a moment, the world felt suspended in fragile silence. After helping her to her feet, Jack led her toward the nearest cabin he knew of, a small wooden structure, abandoned but stable. As they walked, she remained silent, her gaze scanning the surroundings cautiously. Jack noticed her clothes, simple and traditional, and realized she was not a tourist, not a settler. There was a strength in her posture, a quiet dignity even in exhaustion. "I'm Jack," he said gently. She nodded but didn't respond. The canyon walls echoed with the sound of the river behind them, a reminder of how close death had been. Jack couldn't help but feel a mixture of triumph and unease. Saving a life was instinctive, yet something about this encounter hinted at complexities he hadn't anticipated. History, he realized, was never far away. The night fell quickly, stars emerging in the vast Arizona sky. Jack lit a small fire near the cabin, keeping the woman warm as she sat wrapped in the blanket. The cold had seeped into her bones, but she was breathing steadily. Jack watched her in silence, sensing both gratitude and wariness in her eyes. He didn't ask questions. She didn't offer answers. Instead, they simply shared the quiet. The wind rustled through the canyon, carrying whispers of the past. Jack understood instinctively that this wasn't merely about a life saved, it was about boundaries, respect and history that ran deeper than any river. He realized heroism sometimes comes with unexpected responsibilities. The next morning, Jack stepped outside to fetch water and found the cabin surrounded by a small group of Apache elders, their expressions serious and unreadable. The woman from the river stood slightly behind them, observing him. Jack's heart raced. The moment of gratitude had shifted into something heavier, a silent judgment. "You saved her," one elder said slowly, his voice carrying the weight of generations. Jack nodded, his hands raised in respect. The woman stepped forward, her voice quiet but firm. "Your courage was real, but your world and ours carry old wounds." Jack felt a chill, realizing that his instinctive act had entered a landscape of history. Pride and unspoken rules. Compassion, he learned, was never simple. Over the following days, Jack stayed near the cabin, not out of necessity, but out of an unspoken sense of responsibility. He observed, listened, and slowly gained the trust of the elders. The woman, whose name was Ailyn, began to speak in halting English, sharing glimpses of her life, her people, and the deep connection her tribe had to the land and the river. Jack learned about the hardships, the history of displacement, and the pride that refused to be broken. Each story revealed layers of resilience and caution, teaching him that bravery wasn't measured by a single heroic act, but by the willingness to understand and respect another's world. The river that had nearly taken Ailyn's life became a bridge to insight and humility. Jack's nights were restless. He thought of his family, of his lonely ranch, and of the moments that defined him as a man. Yet here, amid the red cliffs and quiet whispers of history, he discovered a new kind of courage, the patience to listen, the humility to learn, and the recognition that a single life saved could ripple through generations. Ailyn, once cautious and distant, began to smile in brief moments, her eyes reflecting both gratitude and the careful pride of someone who had survived more than one challenge. Jack realized that trust was earned, not given, and heroism had layers he had never considered before. One afternoon, as the sun blazed over the river, Ailyn and Jack walked along the bank together, their conversation tentative but genuine. She spoke of the sacred places along the river, of the plants and animals that held meaning for her people, and of traditions that had endured despite hardship. Jack listened, asking questions only when invited, and felt a deep respect for the knowledge she carried. Every word, every story painted a picture of resilience and connection. In turn, he shared small details of his life, his own lessons learned in solitude. The canyon walls seemed to hold their breath, bearing witness to a fragile, growing understanding between two very different worlds. As weeks passed, Jack and Ailyn formed an unspoken bond. It was quiet, respectful, and patient, built on mutual recognition rather than immediate friendship. Jack began to understand that true bravery involved acknowledging boundaries, history, and the unseen struggles that shaped people. Ailyn's tribe observed him closely, testing his patience and humility, and Jack met their scrutiny with steady determination. No gun, no horse, no act of physical courage could replace the courage of listening and understanding. The river, which had once been a site of near tragedy, now symbolized a shared journey, one that required care, respect, and mindfulness at every turn. Jack found himself reflecting on the events more often than he expected. The simplicity he once associated with heroism, rescuing a person in danger, was an illusion. Real courage, he realized, included accountability, history, and the ripple effects of every choice. Saving Ailyn's life had opened doors to understanding and empathy he had never sought, yet now could not ignore. The Arizona sunsets no longer symbolized solitude, but connection. The canyon echoed not just with the river's roar, but with lessons of resilience, trust, and the enduring power of human kindness tempered by respect. Every moment with Ailyn reminded him that actions, however well-intended, come with consequences, and responsibility is part of every act of bravery. One evening, as the stars blanketed the desert sky, Ailyn stood beside Jack on the riverbank. The water shimmered under the moonlight, calm yet alive. "You risked yourself for me," she said softly. "But life is never about just one act. It is about what follows." Jack nodded, understanding the weight of her words. The elders had begun to accept his presence, and trust, once fragile, was slowly cementing. He realized that his journey had shifted from a tale of heroism to a lesson in humility, empathy, and the complexity of human connections. The river that almost claimed her now symbolized a bridge of understanding, resilience, and cautious hope. Jack's experience with Ailyn and her tribe left a permanent mark on him. He returned to his ranch, changed not only by the act of saving a life, but by the layers of history, pride, and respect he had encountered. Every ride along the river, every sunset over the cliffs, reminded him that courage is multidimensional. Heroism is not only in action, but in listening, understanding, and honoring the boundaries of others. The world was broader, more complex, and infinitely more meaningful than he had ever imagined. And in that realization, Jack found a new kind of peace, one born not from solitude, but from shared humanity and the careful stewardship of trust and compassion. Days turned into weeks, and Jack found himself entwined deeper into the life of Aylin and her community. The elders had not immediately accepted him, their silence heavy with unspoken judgment. Yet through consistent acts of patience, respect and willingness to learn, Jack began to gain their trust. Aylin taught him not only the practical knowledge of surviving in the rugged Arizona landscape, where to find edible plants, how to navigate the cliffs safely, which parts of the river were sacred, but also the deeper wisdom of her people. The stories she shared were more than history. They were living lessons, intertwined with honor, resilience, and the silent strength of generations. Jack listened, absorbing every word, realizing that his initial heroism was merely the first step into a far more complex world of understanding. Jack noticed small gestures of recognition from the elders, an approving nod here, a subtle smile there. These were monumental victories in a world governed by caution and pride. Aylin, once wary and reserved, began to engage in conversation with him, testing him with questions that required thoughtfulness rather than speed. One evening, while sitting by a flickering fire under a sky littered with stars, she asked, "Why do you help people without expecting anything in return?" Jack hesitated, realizing this question was less about words and more about understanding his values. He spoke honestly, recounting a life of solitude and the instinct to protect, to act when necessary. She listened, her expression softening, the first true sign of trust emerging. The community's acceptance did not come easily. Jack learned that heroism alone could not erase centuries of history, nor could it heal wounds passed through generations. One day, as he accompanied Aylin to a sacred site along the river, the elders observed him silently from a distance. They were testing his integrity, his patience, his capacity for humility. Every movement he made, every word he spoke, was under careful scrutiny. Jack felt the weight of their gaze, but did not falter. He realized that courage was no longer just about saving a life. It was about proving, day by day, that he could honor boundaries, respect culture, and act with integrity. The river that had once symbolized danger now represented his ongoing trial. Jack's evenings became moments of reflection. Alone by the river, he would stare at the water's currents and consider the lessons Aylin and her tribe had imparted. He began to understand the power of listening, of absorbing knowledge that had been preserved despite the hardships of history. Aylin's tribe lived in balance with the land and the river, and their survival depended on respect and caution. Jack had come as a lone cowboy, thinking courage was measured by action alone. Yet he now saw that wisdom and patience were equally vital. Every shared story, every quiet exchange, was shaping him in ways no gun or rope ever could. Tension arose one afternoon, when an unexpected event tested both Jack and the trust he had slowly earned. A wildfire ignited upstream, threatening to spread rapidly toward the village. Panic began to ripple through the community, and the elders turned to Jack, assessing whether his presence was beneficial or dangerous in this critical moment. Without hesitation, he took the lead in coordinating a defensive response, helping to create fire breaks and assisting the villagers in relocating livestock and essential supplies. His hands were blistered, his shirt scorched, but he moved with precision and determination. By the time night fell, the fire had been contained, and the community survived unscathed. The elders' silence shifted, respect replaced caution, and approval was quietly granted. Through the crisis, Jack and Aylin's bond deepened. There was a sense of shared purpose now, born not from proximity but from action, sacrifice, and understanding. Aylin spoke freely about the ways the tribe had survived past hardships, drawing parallels to the present, and Jack listened, absorbing lessons of resilience and leadership. He realized that courage and heroism were not singular acts, but continuous choices made in alignment with values, history, and the greater good. The river, which had once nearly claimed her life, now mirrored this newfound balance, its current steady, its waters life-giving, a symbol of strength and continuity. As winter approached, the harshness of the desert nights intensified, and Jack found himself fully integrated into the rhythms of the community. He woke before dawn to help with daily chores, learned the subtle signs of approaching storms, and developed an understanding of the land that went beyond physical survival. Alin's tribe no longer viewed him merely as an outsider. He had earned his place through consistent respect, empathy, and courage in moments of crisis. Yet Jack remained humble, aware that acceptance was fragile and that true trust required ongoing demonstration of integrity. He began to see that heroism could coexist with humility, and that strength was not in dominance, but in cooperation and understanding. One evening, as snow lightly dusted the cliffs, Ailyn shared a story of her grandmother, who had once faced a similar test of trust with an outsider. The tale was not about confrontation, but about patience, vigilance, and the power of observation. Jack listened intently, realizing that her words were not just history, but guidance for him. He understood that the community's cautious acceptance was not a final judgment, but a process, one he had navigated